Good morning, everybody. Today is February 23rd, 2018. This is MMA Junkie Radio's pre-show, the show before the show. As I am talking, I realize February 23rd is an important day. I just don't remember why. It's probably somebody's birthday, and I think that's what it is. It's my Uncle Tom's birthday. So
Happy birthday, Uncle Tom.
Here's what I'm going to do. Since I know George didn't remember, I am going to text my Uncle Tom right now while you guys are all watching, and I'm going to say happy birthday. And then I am going to remind George later so that I look like a superstar. Happy birthday.
This is your play very often.
Yeah.
I've witnessed this.
Boom. All right. Today's show, we will have Dave LaGreca. But he may not be Dave LaGreca. He may be something else. We're going to attempt to give him a nickname that Danny created. I will co-sign on it. He will be on the show, as well as UFC bantamweight Bryan Caraway, who no-showed us the other day. We're like, Bryan, I don't Caraway.
Twice. No.
No, not twice,
right?
just once.
Oh, just once? Oh.
Yeah, but he'll be over the phone. Usually we have him in studio, but we're getting a little close to his fight, so we want to make sure we don't interfere with any of that. And should be a fun show. The daily debate, we'll get into that today. What else? I feel like at any point Danny should be saying yeah, like right around now.
Yeah.
That helps.
It's Friday. We talk about what everybody's doing over the weekend.
I didn't even know it was Friday. I thought today was Wednesday. Danny had to correct me.
Well, here's how you can always keep track. My TV show is on Wednesdays, so you tuned in for that, so you should know.
I did. I tuned
that's
into the first 15 minutes of it, and then there was a slight communication. No, not really. I think I just overreacted to something, and I hit the eject button, and I missed the rest of it.
What you talking about, Goose?
Danny's show. He said something.
This is your captain speaking. We are making our descent into Las Vegas McCarran Airport. On behalf of our crew, we'd like to thank you for flying MMA Junkie Airlines. Now please fasten your seatbelts and put your tray tables in your upright position because the descent is gonna be a little bit bumpy.
Alright, Junkie Nation, it's time to roll, baby, on MMA Junkie Radio with Gorgeous George and Gold. This is what we doing while we do it, baby. All night long, we rollin'! Yeah!
The MMA Junkie Radio revolution is upon us.
Can you dig it?
There's no escape. No escape. Through the vast frontier of cyberspace and through a sea of stars in outer space.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We've solidified our combat communication stranglehold.
We are controlling transmission.
With the use of MMA Junkie Radio and SiriusXM satellite radio technology. MMA Junkie Radio. Commence transmission. Live from MMA Junkie Radio HQ in the fight capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. Here are your hosts, Gorgeous George and Goes.
From the fight capital of the world, inside the beautiful Mandalay Bay Racing Sportsbook, you are listening to the MMA Junkie Radio Show, the only show that matters. I'm your host, Gorgeous George. With me as always is the devious and dastardly Goes. He's our ace co-host. To my left, it's the fight analyst, Dan Tom, and of course, back east, handling all the producing duties, it's Danny Otto. What's up, guys? Happy Friday.
Man, I thought today was Wednesday. I don't know why. I think it might have had to do with the dream I had, but...
What was the dream?
I don't remember it, but I just remember it was a crazy dream, so I think it might have thrown me off. But when
Did it
Danny
involve
told me it was Friday,
camels and humps and things like that?
No, but that's...
Was there an ash on your forehead?
No, but camels and humps
Did you go way back looking at your photo album?
Oh, I get it. Sorry. No, I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. I do want to throw one thing out there.
Or what's going on with him? Did he do some drugs earlier? Or?
I don't know.
All right. We're a minute in. He hasn't made sense yet.
Guy could have just said no. He left it out there like it's an option, like I'm this fucking Scarface over here or something. I do want to throw one thing out there, George,
Okay, all
if
right.
you want to get to it at some point.
Yeah.
Danny said something earlier today, and I don't remember how it went down, but he said something along the lines of, that reminds me of a time I bruised my ribs when I was tied to a truck in an inner tube, and the inner tube exploded.
Well, I got to
And
hear that
I
story.
said, Danny, I go, stop right there. I don't want to hear any more details. This may be something that you're just going to want to tell all three of us.
Yeah. What's up with that, Danny?
Tell you exactly here. I'll tell you how it came into being. I said we were talking about Brad Tavares, who was in yesterday.
Fighting in
And I said he-
elevators?
No, not fighting out. But he just, I was saying, he seems like a lot like my drummer, to the point where, like, if I lived in Vegas and Brad just sent me a text saying, hey, some of us are getting together, we'll figure something out, I would be like, yeah, I'm gonna go hang out with Brad, but I have no idea if I'm gonna get injured or not hanging out with Brad, because it's gonna probably it'll be fun, but who knows if I'm gonna get injured. And I said my drummer's a lot like that, because I'll go down to, my drummer lives right outside of Philly, so I'll go down and I'll like hang for the weekend if we have a gig or two down in Philly, and that gets me into trouble because
The fuck happened in the truck with the inner tube?
What are you doing, Danny?
I wanted to prep the story. Anyway, yeah.
It's a 2-hour show. We're gonna be off the air. You're gonna have to tell it on Luke's show or something, or at the fights by the time you're done prepping.
There was a big snowstorm last year. I got snowed in at my drummer's house, and we were bored. And he had a truck that could go in a foot of snow, and he decided to push it as far as it would go. I hit a giant snowbank going, I think it was 40 miles an hour.
40 miles an hour on an inner tube?
Well,
dude, of course it's
So
going to
he
explode.
was pulling Danny with his trunk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you not think that thing was going to explode?
Well, at the time, he just handed it to me and goes, do it. It'll be fun.
Jesus.
So
I
you're
didn't think he was going to go that fast.
Steve
It wasn't
over here.
40. It wasn't 40. It was probably more, it felt like 40. It was probably like 25, 30 tops,
Right.
I'm sure.
Then he hit
But,
what?
yeah.
An embankment?
Yeah, just like where the snow had piled up in one section. He did it on purpose. He swung me out. It was one of those things where
Wow.
I was holding on to it, like the actual inner tube was tied to it, and so he turned really sharp. So I swung out and I hit this big giant bank of snow.
Oof.
And I
was it like
landed
impacted hard, or was there any give?
There was no give.
Oh, wow.
There was no give.
Did you break your
But
ribs?
I didn't break my ribs because it didn't completely like explode. Like I didn't hit the ground. I hit it, and then it got a big giant rip in it at the same time. So it helped me.
Considering it could have been his head, I'll take the ribs, right? If
Oh,
you're
hell yeah. Take a broken bone
Dan
for that.
Stupp, when I went inner tubing on his boat, or he was pulling me with his boat, I think he told me, oh no, he may have reached 60 miles an hour. But I'll ask him. Maybe it was 40. Yeah, and so when I flew, I've always heard that thing about when you're going super fast in water and you skid, it's like hitting cement. I'm like, come on, it ain't cement. I mean, it's water, you know? Like the human body just falls into the water. And I skidded. Now, at no time did I feel like, oh my God, this feels like cement as it was happening.
Like a rock?
But I did skid, and at that moment in time, I actually thought about, like, now I get it. It's not cement, but you do feel it.
It's like the belly flop, right?
They knocked the wind out of me a little bit. I was more concerned with my trunks had actually almost fallen down to my ankles. And so you have to, tie them bad boys up pretty good. But it none of it prevented me from going, I'm never doing that again. It was fun. Maybe I'd tell him, hey, slow down a little. But he couldn't knock me off, so then he started getting a little more aggressive. And then when he did, in the end, I preferred that. Juliet, for example, went on, and then she just ended her ride by waving and saying, like, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. But I think you have to experience the fall itself at least one time and just hope you don't get hurt. But 40 miles is pretty fast. And to slam into an embankment, like like he said, he has no give. I exactly was skidding on water before it eventually came to a stop.
Didn't Dwayne lose his shorts?
Dwayne. Oh, Dwayne Finley, yeah, I think so.
Somebody did on one of those inner tube things.
Yeah, Dwayne and
What kind of shorts you
Jeremy
guys wearing?
Botter and Matt Erickson. They well, no, trust me,
He's wearing
it's like
basketball shorts,
no, it's
or
not
what?
like they're loose. I tie them, But you just have to really tie them, otherwise that can happen. So
I'd wear overalls.
and some aren't typed, some are just Velcro, some you just button. So it depends. If he had a loose pair, it could easily happen.
Would people be more inclined if they saw that happen? Go, is that The Rock, or would they say, is that Alpha?
Me or Dwayne?
You.
Alpha.
Alpha.
Yeah. White lie, right? White lie. That's the one of the Wild Samoans, right?
Yeah.
It sounded like it. Yeah. You have to give the new generation kind of like a more current,
Well, I don't want to call
fluffy
you Rikishi
wrestler.
or something
No,
like
no,
that.
not
Like,
Rikishi.
that's
Nobody's
a
gonna
little
say
overboard.
that. But I don't know. Whoever's a big guy. Hey, speaking of pro wrestling, great segue. We'll have Dave LaGreca from Busted Open, a show that's on our channel, Rush 93. He is one of the hosts of Busted Open, along with Bully Ray and Mark Henry, and they've been doing this show for a long time. He'll be on the show with us, because this weekend the WWE has a big event, and we're hearing Ronda Rousey will be, I guess, maybe unveiled. I don't know if it's going to be as a performer or just a bigger role than obviously her just coming out and like she did last time. I guess it was at the Royal Rumble. I get those shows confused. But it's pretty clear she's a part of the WWE stable, and there will be some wrestling going on. So it'll be interesting to see, in his opinion, as he's been a lifelong pro wrestling fan, through his eyes, how does he feel like they will handle her career? Because I think she signed a multi-year contract. It's not a one and done, like a cash grab or nothing like that. It's not a, hey, we'll only see her once per quarter. It sounded to me like she would be active. Now, is she going to do house shows all over the country? I doubt it, but we'll talk to Dave LaGreca about that. We'll also be joined by Bryan Caraway, who's got a fight coming up against Cody Stamann 1 week from tomorrow here in Las Vegas, UFC 222. I think Uncle Matt E may join us as well later on in the show. He's down in Orlando, and this Saturday is UFC on Fox 28, headlined by Josh Emmett versus Jeremy Stevens. Now, this is a big Fox show, so SoCalers, where we're from, that's Channel 11. Vegas Peeps, where we're now currently living, it's Channel 5, and across the country, I'm pretty sure you all know what your big four are, at least: CBS, NBC, Fox, and ABC. It's on Big Fox
always like that, huh?
with an early start time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific for the main card. Everything basically starts 2 hours before. Prelims will go live at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. You're right.
For all you young'uns, there was a time
It was ABC,
where we all
CBS,
said,
and NBC.
what is this new Fox thing all about?
Fox was maybe late 80s, I think, is when it finally came around. And I think The Simpsons was one of their first shows. And The Simpsons are still around.
I remember,
Right?
yeah. I was in 7th grade, and I had to finish a science project in time to watch the premiere of The Simpsons. That's how long that show's been on.
Yeah. I would say that back then, if you had to say what was the fourth biggest... Oh, I don't even want to attempt this. I don't know what it was.
No, wouldn't it be...
PBS, maybe?
Well, yeah.
See, I don't know if that was local or if that was national, if there was a PBS that was national. It doesn't matter. It was ABC, CBS, and NBC by a wide margin. And then Fox came out of nowhere, and look at them. They host Super Bowls.
World Series.
Yeah.
The only thing they haven't
I wanted to say
touched
the
is
Olympics.
basketball, right?
Have they ever done the
I
Olympics?
don't think
No,
they've
right?
done the Olympics. They've never touched basketball.
No.
I think they have had NHL, right?
I don't know. I think so. It rings a bell. But anyway, how do we get started on that? Oh yeah, Big Fox. Yeah. So Saturday, Matt. We were talking earlier, and it looks like he'll come on and brief us on everything that's going on down there. Did you guys get a whiff of the weigh-ins today? Everyone make weight? Are we good?
Nah, I was out there doing the call.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was on the call as well. Do you know Dan?
I didn't catch either. I'm still catching up.
Okay. See if you can pull it up, and I think they should be done. It was 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. our time. So 9 a.m. over there, they had the 2 hours to go on the scale. So by now, we either know if everyone weighed in or who didn't. I'm hoping no fights are off. I know one got taken off earlier this week because somebody must not have passed their hydration test. It was an early pull.
Yeah.
Gilbert Burns, if I'm not mistaken. But, we're hoping that the rest of the card is safe and already starting their hydration process.
So it looks like one fighter missed weight on his first attempt, flyweight Alex Perez. He's 126.5.
That's makeable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't want that half point. Look, I don't want to send the kid to the hospital. But I think he can make the half point and not have to give up 20% of his purse is what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah. Or is it official? He's just done.
Oh, wait, on a second try. So Perez came back after 40 minutes of his allotted 1 hour and actually was 127 on a second try.
Must have cheated. Down some water. Oh, well, that's unfortunate.
So, yeah,
I met his family, and I believe he came through Dana White's Contender Series. I met his family, sat near them, and he was a good kid. So was his family. I remember his mom was a really, really, huge supporter and cheering for him. Very nice. That Dana White Contender Series, man, 6 months has gone by. What the fuck? Bring it back. Well, it was such a cool setting. You couldn't be, you weren't more than 10 feet away from all the fans that were in there, really. So it wasn't like by some luck I was near the Perez family. You were just near everybody. But it was really cool to see them go through their emotions, highs and lows.
For those of you who've been to the studio at Mandalay Bay, picture this is the cage. This is the octagon, the inside of the studio. If you're an attendee, you're basically on the other side of the glass, right? I mean, you're right there.
Yeah.
It's as close as you could possibly be.
You could hear it all. The coaches, and
they could hear it all. That was probably different for them.
The fighters?
No, the other corners could probably hear each other.
Yeah.
And the families of each other could hear each other. So, you could hear everything that was going on. And what's crazy is when we were there and they were wrapping up the last week, somebody had told me that they were shooting for November to come back with that. Mm-hmm. So, they are way off.
I have a feeling that if there's a delay, it has to do with this may have been so big that the production's going to be even bigger. The splash in Season 2 is going to be bigger. I think they want to keep it on UFC Fight Pass, but who knows? Maybe they'll move to a channel, because I think this has legs. I think it could be something that's, pretty damn big. I think there's the fights. Look, that night you have a chance to win a contract. So you're 1 of 5. You have a 20% chance, or maybe less than that, because you have to beat your opponent. And then once you do, the winners have a 20% chance, at least. I think there may have been 1 week where no one advanced, but I believe there was a couple weeks where 2 people advanced. So on an average, at least 1, maybe 1.5 if you want to call it, were advancing. So what I like is the fights occur, that everybody's going for it. The president's right there. The 2 matchmakers are right there. And you're 2 hours away from knowing if you're in the UFC or not. But then they sit them all in the back room, and there's just that, we'll call it that Miss Universe moment, and the winner is, or the winners are, should she not be able to fulfill the number 1 contender? Because, again, sometimes 2 people go in. So it's just dramatic.
If something crazy doesn't happen over the weekend, I already know what our topic should be for the daily debate on Monday. What do you think of that, George? Pretty interesting, right?
Oh, yeah.
That might be a good one.
That's a great question.
Dan, Tom, you want to see this from over there?
That's a great question.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah.
For Monday.
Right. For Monday.
Yeah.
Back to another question, because it ties into a question that I have, which ties into the relevant fight card at hand. You're saying that this kid missed weight further on his second attempt.
Yeah.
So let me read it one more time just to make sure here.
Because, and then my question is, while he's looking that up, is there this? We would never be asking what the results of the weigh-ins were if this was like 5 or 6 years ago. Again, now Dan Tom, here goes Dan Tom on his high horse about the oversaturation argument. But is there something to this, guys? Is there too much out there? Because another reason why I bring it up in relation to the weigh-ins question, I wouldn't have asked that question on air for something that I probably should know. It's my job. But I literally just spent 10 minutes scrolling through an hour and 10 minutes of a news feed that's dedicated to only MMA news, and there wasn't one article or one mention about this morning's weigh-ins. It was about everything else that's going on, because there's always just so much going on at all times in the sport. Is there too much? I'm not.
Well, sometimes you feel that way when it all comes crashing.
Yeah.
But other times, there's a struggle, I guess, to come up with topics, or you'll look at the page, and if you're a headline scanner, because I try and get to the stories, but I don't get to all of them, I'll be honest. I should do better at that. It's just some don't make my tail wag. It's as simple as that. Some matchup on Fight Pass on the Poland card, I don't know who the fuck they are. I never heard of them. At least maybe if they came through LFA or Titan. Oh, that's that guy. Shorty Torres. Like, I anticipate maybe him, being in the UFC sometime soon. Something like that. Curtis Millender. But then there are times where if there's nothing else, I do find myself clicking a certain story that I probably wouldn't have in the past, and then going, "Oh, okay, good to know," But to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know why I wasn't on the news feed. I know everything maybe got pushed up 2 hours earlier.
Right.
So you may have just maybe West Coast writers or bloggers.
To me,
Really?
it's even in some cards. It'll even happen fight night, which is crazy for me. I'll see other stuff getting Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not as crazy as it is for pay-per-views, or I really think. I think maybe it is too much.
And there are, and I agree, because you have to at a certain point, like George is saying, everybody has a different vetting process, but to a certain point, you do have to vet. But that being said, I do find myself even, which says a lot, because I'm in a position where I could just as easily be burnt out. But there's actually a lot of articles I see that I actually want to take the time to read. That are whether most of them actually aren't even fight related. They're just stories that are being put out on fighters that I'm just curious about as a fan of the sport and these fighter stories.
Like the unions, the associations, the CTEs, the this
lot.
and that. But
yeah,
you're right. Rashad Evans once said that he feels like he's learned 800 out of 1,000 techniques that in mixed martial arts.
Right.
And he feels like he wishes he could get back to just the 200 and 300 he knew. That sometimes when he's fighting, it's how they say it's mental.
Yeah.
He's got so much overload. Like, boy, a jab would be nice. And by the time he says it, he's getting hit with a jab. Because for that split second, he thought, I could hit him with a, and then he didn't. He didn't do either. It's got like the hard drive overload.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with me. I felt like when I was trying to keep up with Titan and CES and LFC and RFA before they became LFA, and just Brazil, their reality show. And then what I came to find out was it just doesn't matter. It's I'll liken this to the NFL. It's good to know your starting 11 on both sides and maybe some key rotational people, punter, kicker, but that's about 25 to 30 athletes. I don't think you need to know about all 53. There's just not enough time if you want to keep up with that, have a normal life, and that's why I think the pressure's on to the smaller organizations. I mean, and if they're successful, then good on them. But if they are struggling, then think outside the box and do something that's relevant, because what people care about are what's going on in the UFC and select fighters in Bellator or select cards in Bellator.
Mm-hmm.
Not every single Bellator card and not every single fighter, because I can tell you right now, not every single UFC fighter matters, unfortunately.
Right.
And it's up to them to make themselves matter. So make the most out of every single walk down that aisle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't have enough time. It sounds weird to say that because Brad was here for 2 hours, but I wanted to tell Brad at the end, boy, for being 11-4, like 16-4 overall, that's 80%. 11-4 in the UFC is really, really good. I mean, Jeremy Stevens is at 14-13. He's headlining, and I wanted to ask Brad one final question. And like, could you be popping or clicking a little bit more having those types of credentials? And the funny thing is as you saw with the street fight stories and just the way he is, Brad at any moment can pop off.
Right.
Is that what it takes? Is maybe a year or two of turning into Colby Covington? Maybe not to that extent, but just the hell with the respectful call out. Maybe have a nasty call out, start getting a little bit more selfish, because that's 15 walks he's made in the UFC. That's 11 wins.
The show, right?
Including the show. Like, he seems healthy. I hope he's healthy. But how many more does he have? Another 10? Another 15? Mm-hmm. Not too many fighters. I think only 1 or 2 have made it to 30. And from 25 to 30, there's probably about 2 dozen. So it's time to really, really maximize every single camp, every single fight, and bringing more attention to yourself, I guess. I would really like if Brad were to win 2 more fights to fight for a world title. Because that would make him 13-4.
He's got a great personality too.
He does.
Represents Hawaii.
But for some reason, when you think of the top middleweights, you're just like, why is Lyoto and Vitor popping more than Brad versus Jotko? I guess it's because they're former champions. They're grandfathered into an era where
headliners.
You only thought about them for 3 months. And regardless of whether they win or lose, that fight people are going to pay a ticket for it, and so I want that to happen to a lot of the fighters that have put in their time and deserve it.
But pick a better description. Popping off is just lame, right? Like, just sounds dumb. Think of something else.
Wow.
Shots
wow.
fired.
No wow, no wow.
Wow.
Wow. Shots fired.
He was
Wow.
answering a phone call.
Must be.
I'm not answering a phone call. I was pausing for dramatic effect.
Yeah.
Wow.
there you go.
I'm just kidding. Popping off is a fun show featuring Danny Oker.
Oh, yeah. How was it last night? Or 2 nights ago? Or no, last night.
Well, I
No,
only
2
listened to
nights
the
ago.
first couple
2 nights
minutes.
ago,
I had
yeah.
to hit the ejection button.
What happened?
You had to pop off.
I think it was my fault, but
It was 100% your fault.
What
he-
turned you off?
all right. I was into it, but then he said, when we come back, we're going to talk about Black Panther. I haven't seen Black Panther yet. So I instantly cut the feed, and apparently Danny said, we're not going to spoil anything, but I might have missed that part. And so I didn't want to risk it, so I had advised Danny the next morning, if you're going to break down something that just happened, like a movie, maybe say we're going to talk about it at the end of the show so nobody has to worry. But then he said, I did say there were no spoilers. So probably, that's my bad talk.
That's hilarious. There's a film podcast I listened to, and one of the hosts was being accused of spoiling movies too much. And one of the listeners actually had to email, be like, "Hey, I actually listen to you guys on a bicycle on my commutes to work, and it's hard to reach the pause button when Bryan spoils the movie. So could you guys maybe hold it off to the end?" And
That's not a bad idea.
But somebody's told us that before, that they're on a bike and it's difficult to hit pause.
And it's funny. So the guy will be explaining a movie, and the other co-host will keep him in check if he thinks he's gonna spoil a movie. Like, Bryan, guy on the bike, Bryan, guy on the bike, guy on the bike.
Nice.
So it's always good to keep the guy on the bike in the mind, and that's what goes with the guy on the bike. It sounds
I
like
was
on
the guy
the.
on the bike. I just hit the panic button.
That was a big deal on forums when it had to do with Pride or
Oh, remember that?
Dream. I think I have to sneeze.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Dude.
Let's take a commercial because I got to wash my hands. You're listening to MMA Junkie Radio on Sirius XM, Rush 93. Stay close, and we'll be right back. We'll do a run of calls, and pretty much we got to talk to Dave LaGreca in 5 minutes anyway. So he's the host of Busted Open on Channel 93 with Bully Ray and Mark Henry. You should check it out. If you're a pro wrestling fan, you'll really dig it. I listened to it on the way in, and they do a tremendous job. All right, stay close, and we'll be right back.
Hey, but now they know I tried to kill him. Hold on, Mom. Here are George and Goes.
Celebrate the start of spring training baseball games today on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. Listen for live reports from spring training and hear the news from the fantasy baseball perspective. Get the edge over your fantasy football or fantasy baseball competition with SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, Sirius 210, XM87, and on the SiriusXM app. Also, while we're at it,
baseball, man. Oh, here we go.
While we're at it, I want to wish our Uncle Tom a happy birthday. Today's his birthday today.
Happy birthday, Uncle Tom.
Uncle Tom.
Yeah. So they have 162 games to figure out who plays, in the playoffs. I like their playoff system though. At least they get down. These 5 teams, like 2 of them are a wild card. The wild card plays, and
they adjusted it, right? They added that other wild card a few years back, so they're making things work.
I wish the first series was 5 games, and I know some people say it's not enough. Fuck yeah, it's enough. The Super Bowl settles in 1. I understand that the divisional, like to win the actual pennant, should be 7, and the World Series 7. But that first one, hey, if you didn't have it, you didn't have it. If the wild cards are deciding it in 1 game, you guys can't figure it out in 3 and 5. Your ace still can go twice, even if he starts 2 and 5. If he didn't get in on 1 and 4. I don't know.
But still, like the pitching matchup.
45 games exhibition drama just to warm them up. Couldn't you guys have come into shape? You got 162 to fucking figure it out. Oh, baseball. Pain in the ass. Just fast forward to September and tell me who's in, and then put a hat on me and I'll cheer. Marco from Waco, let's get that fool in before we talk to Dave LaGreca from Busted Open. What's up, Marco? How you doing?
Marco from Waco, que pasa, datos, real quick. Dan Tom and his oversaturation argument, quit it. Stop it, Dan. Stop it. We're just talking about baseball, 162 games each team, and people still watch the shit. Basketball, 82 games of the year with plus the playoffs, still people watch it. Pro wrestling is every day, Mondays and Tuesdays. Raw and SmackDown. Each week, each of the year, plus their pay-per-views, plus their online content, people still watch it. The problem is not oversaturation, man. It's the problem is how you present the product. Maybe trim the roster a little bit so we can concentrate, get a little less fighters that we can promote, and put the rest to the local leagues, because there is MMA everywhere. We got Bellator. You want Bellator to stop doing so many events? They don't do that many anyway. We got LFA, Titan, Invicta. We got ONE SC in Japan, Ryzen. There is plenty of MMA. The UFC is not the problem of oversaturation, it's the problem of the quality of the product. Peace out.
Hey, hold on.
At least let Dan Tom retort.
Yeah, especially since your points that you made to me are actually the points that I made in my own argument, to be honest, but all right.
Did he leave? Is he still there?
No, he's still there, I think.
He's there.
He's still here?
Well, man. I mean, I don't know where you want me to stop the product. First of all, the word product, let's look at the products itself. The products that you used were well-established products. Well-established products in pro wrestling were well-established in entertainment. Or you mentioned a well-established product, the institution, American institution of baseball, a well-established product, where you have cities, teams, and so forth. And the pro wrestling product is more storyline-based than sports, and they're actually doing the time to put the storylines and investment to tell the stories of their people in their roster, and they don't have as big of a roster the pro wrestling as the UFC does. That is one of the main criticisms of not just the UFC but MMA in general. That is the question, that whether you're Bellator, a regional show, or the UFC, you're trying to figure out how to promote. Now, the other side of that equation, in relation to the example you brought up, Marco, the athletic side, that is another criticism that we are having with our sport. What do the rankings mean? How are we expected to be taken seriously if we can't stick to the rankings and this and that, and the meritocracy, if you will? And again,
I like that word.
And again, baseball is a more established sport. How can we get our beloved sport that we love, you love to call into a show, we love so much that we dedicate our working lives to? We want the sport to do well. The sport does well. Everybody does well. Our entertainment value, our jobs, our livelihood, all that stuff does well. We're rooting for it. So it's not a, I hope it's not coming off as a negative or an anti-UFC, or it is in best interest for the sport. So, I mean, I'm not sure what you're coming at, Marco, but I will say that I actually agree with your points for what it's worth, man. There are plenty of things. It's not going to stop. And I'm not saying it to. I'm cheering for guys like Bellator. I'm cheering for the regional shows. I'm cheering for the fighters that are trying to get their stories out there. So I'm not sure what you're coming at against. I'll let you retort here if you like, man. But that's my stance on it, man.
Make it real quick though, because we have our guest on hold.
I know that is coming. When it comes to oversaturation, what I say that I don't think that structure is wrong. I mean, we got long shows, but for me, Fight Pass, the prelims, and the main card are 3 different shows, and that's how they're structured all the time. We need a space for these fighters to be featured. We cry and freaking cry about, hey, we need more fights, we need more fights, we need more fights. And when finally we got him, and instead of having 12 shows a year, we got 45 shows a year. Now we're complaining about it. So what is the middle ground? That is what I am asking.
Yeah, what man. Yeah, no, I'm asking too.
Everybody
Okay, homeboy. All right, see you, Marco. All right, guys, we'll talk a little bit more about that because I think I have an experiment I want to run by you guys. But first, we got to focus on our colleague on SiriusXM Rush 93, Dave LaGreca. He hosts Busted Open Monday through Friday for 3 hours, man. These guys go 9 a.m. Eastern start time with an immediate replay right afterwards. Him and Bully Ray and Mark Henry, they've assembled a great team out there. I catch them on the way into work. He joins us now on MMA Junkie Radio. What's up, Dave? How you doing?
Hey, what's up, boys? And I really enjoyed the conversation with Marco because it kind of relates to what goes on in pro wrestling. Like, you need like you have Bellator in MMA. You need those associations and those companies outside of the main UFC and WWE to thrive and survive. It makes everybody better. So that was a good conversation.
Well, did you like it better when there was a WCW with the full roster that they had in the 90s and then the WWE on the other channel, the other sports league on another channel competing? Did you like those days, or did you like it eventually when they were all together and you could see these matchups that you always had wished you could have seen?
No, I think competition makes everything better. So when you're actually competing one company against the other and you're almost on an even ground, an even keel, that just makes you want to step up your programming more. So for a long time with the WWE, and they were the only game in town, there was no competition. You can see that there was a lack in a lot of what was going on with their programming. And now where there's other associations outside of the WWE that are thriving and are healthy, and that the WWE feels not so much a threat, but there's some other things going on around them, that just makes competition always makes things better.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Goes, you have some questions for Dave LaGreca. I know there's a big event happening this weekend, and a former MMA athlete. I think we can officially safely say former. I don't think Ronda will ever be back in the UFC or in MMA, but she will be appearing now and going forward, not just this weekend, but going forward, Elimination Chamber here in Las Vegas.
Well, yeah, the reason all this came about, Dave, was obviously you're an expert in what you do, and I'm not even the biggest pro wrestling fan, George, but I listen to a show because it's entertaining, and that's pretty hard to do, to grab someone that's not even really watching it and still be entertained by what goes on their show. So props to you guys. But the way all this came about was we were trying to figure out, look, we've had it before where pro wrestlers come into mixed martial arts and they kind of have to earn their stripes, not just amongst the fighters, but amongst the fans as well. In this case, we have one of our guys going over to your sport, and this has happened before with Ken Shamrock. We've seen something like that before, and he's had great success over there. Ronda Rousey going over there, it's a female. Where this all started was we wanted to know, does she kind of have to earn her stripes first before she gets respect in that locker room, or because of the feats that she's accomplished here in mixed martial arts, does she just command respect as she comes in? I know you're the guy that would have the pulse on all this. How does all that work in the locker room? Do you think, have you heard anything so far?
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, earlier this week we had Nia Jax on our show. Nia Jax is one of the female wrestlers on Monday Night Raw, and I asked her that same question, just like what you just presented. What does Ronda Rousey need to do when she shows up on Sunday and she walks into that locker room? What needs to happen? And she was very clear in saying that Ronda has to go up to each individual wrestler, shake their hand, look at them in the eye, and greet them and show them respect. And that's absolutely what needs to happen. Obviously, she has a great reputation coming in, what she's been able to do in MMA, and really mainstream across the board. I mean, people know who Ronda Rousey is. So she already comes in there with respect. But she's got to show that same respect to everybody else. Because, and you guys know this, when somebody new comes into the world of MMA, your background before doesn't really mean much once you walk into that octagon. And it's the same thing for Ronda Rousey. Now, she's showing all the signs. She's telling everybody about how she has a passion for pro wrestling. She's always been a fan of pro wrestling, and that this is something that she wants to do full time. She's been training for it, and that she's going to continue to train, and this is something that she wants to do moving forward. So she's saying all the right things, but we're not going to know until Sunday when she has her contract signing if she's going to do the right thing. And with social media the way it is today, I'm really going to be focused on a lot of the women's wrestlers on that WWE roster and what they're saying about Ronda coming out of Sunday.
Dave, how can she win over the fans? How are they going to embrace her in here? Or is she the type of person that you think they will gravitate to right away, or will she have that sort of feeling out process with the fans as well?
Well, when Kurt Angle on Monday Night Raw a few weeks ago made the announcement that Ronda Rousey was going to sign her contract at Elimination Chamber this Sunday, the fans booed. And we've seen that before. Yeah, they booed. And it's because I think they're going to follow the example of what the wrestlers are going to want and see. Ronda Rousey, she's, like I said, she's saying all the right things. She came to the ring with, Roddy Piper's leather jacket that his son gave to her. So, as from sight and what she's saying, it's when you're gonna get the true reaction from the fans is when she steps into the squared circle for the first time. When she has her first match, that's when you're gonna get the true reaction and what the people are feeling. You're really not gonna gauge that until you actually see her in the ring.
Would you recommend, from a business standpoint, there's certain wrestlers who, we'll take a Brock Lesnar, right? He has a massive presence. But a guy like Paul Heyman is just as responsible for getting him over, a manager to set them up with the right things to say. Would you advise Ronda Rousey to have that sort of connection with someone as well to help her present herself to the WWE fans?
Well, listen, if she came down the entrance ramp with Paul Heyman by her side and Paul Heyman grabbed the mic and she didn't have to, absolutely that would work. That's something I think that they should do. But it depends what they want her character to be. If you're with Paul Heyman, you're going to be a heel. Does the WWE want Ronda Rousey to be a heel? I don't think they do. I think they want her to be a face. They want her to be able to go on daytime talk shows and to be out there and be one of the biggest faces on their roster for their women wrestlers. So it all goes by what the character needs to be. Brock Lesnar's that unbeatable beast. You don't need Brock Lesnar to take a microphone and say anything. He's just that ass kicker. Believe me, he's not ass kisser. He's just that ass kicker. What is the character? What character will be defined for Ronda Rousey? And let me ask you guys. I mean, somebody who, you're not in the wrestling world, is a heel Ronda Rousey going to get mainstream attention, or is it a face Ronda Rousey that's going to get mainstream attention?
Oh, I love that scowl that she has on her face. I
think she should come in as a heel because she hasn't been doing many interviews. So then right away she can just kind of get away from like, hey, I'm too good for you all. You just shared with us that she was received with boos. Yeah. I thought when she neglected the fine, or when she basically remember when Miesha Tate tried to shake her hand after the second fight and she dissed her. I thought that was like a heel move that she stuck to it, and she has her pride, she has her ego. So I would say that because of the way she's already been received, you might as well go heel. I believe you can always turn.
I'm glad you brought
this.
Here's
the other big thing.
Well,
I'm sorry not to interrupt, but go ahead.
Oh, no, I was glad you brought this up, Dave, because my question actually involved this exactly. And I think it's not only a miss, as somebody who comes from, martial arts, choreography, and acting. Pro wrestling was right in my wheelhouse growing up. And I thought there's a big missed opportunity for not just pro wrestling character, where I thought they were going to go the Bill Goldberg approach. You guys were just talking about the WCW and WWF, golden age era of the late 90s. I thought they were going to go more that route, bring her in as the heel. It's more easier from acting a chop perspective and kind of having the entertainment chops, but also from what George is saying, he's nailing it right here. A PR perspective, it parlays right into that. The narrative from her PR relations and MMA narrative transferring over, from losses, gaining, losing favor with interviews, and I felt it could have played perfectly. So sorry to be long-winded, but does that play into the point you were going to make, Dave?
I was actually going to go to what you've experienced in the MMA world. Her last two fights didn't go well. And I think one of the things that we're going to have to see, even in the wrestling world, is what his psyche's going to be like. You know from watching wrestling, like, you know, if you're in the ring giving a promo and the fans don't like what you say and they're doing the what chants in between every single syllable while you're trying to talk on the microphone, how is she going to adapt to that? You know, if she's in the ring wrestling somebody and she misses a move or she screws up, how is she going to be able to react to that? Because that's my question to you guys. You know Ronda Rousey a hell of a lot more than I do. I mean, what's her psyche like? You know, it seemed like that she kind of folded. She still refuses to talk about those 2 losses that she had at the end of her UFC career. So what's her psyche going to be like going into the squared circle?
It's fragile.
Yeah.
It's fragile right now. Going to the WWE, I believe her psyche is more prepared to be on the receiving end of boos and hisses and people, you know, basically shoving her away, you know, and that'll be good for her. It'll make her work hard to get their approval, because when she's very goal driven. I mean, to be an Olympian and to be a UFC world champion and now perform for the WWE, you have to really, really apply yourself. So I believe this is just the easier way to get her in, because again, if you come in as a babyface and things don't go well, then going back to what Dave said, the great word, psyche. Will she crumble? You know, it could very well happen.
Yeah.
Then you have damaged goods, and then, you know, like you said, her UFC career is over. So then, what if this fails? You know, what's next for Ronda Rousey?
I guess the questions for her maybe are harder to answer. I mean, I definitely side with George, and I'm of the opinion that it's fragile. But as far as the building process, I mean, you know, I have a limited sample size that I can draw from my pro wrestling fandom, but you know, back to the previous example of Bill Goldberg, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a little bit of a build before he got that put over performance where he faces the drunk Scott Hall out of the limousine and Hulk Hogan, right? Like, there was a build before that kind of big put over match.
Yeah.
Is Rousey gonna?
Of course.
Does Rousey get any kind of build, or is she just getting shoved right over to the put over match right away?
It's a good question. With Goldberg, you had to have that build. Nobody knew who the hell he was. So you had to present that. You had to have him go mainstream by having that undefeated streak. Ronda Rousey comes in, everyone already knows who she is. So, you know, I think it's more of the case of her having that big match, you know, somewhat soon. I mean, if you're going to have her debut at the Rumble and her come out and point at the WrestleMania sign at the Royal Rumble, and now here at Elimination Chamber, the last pay-per-view for Monday Night Raw before WrestleMania, and she's going to have her contract signing, don't you need to have her at WrestleMania? So, you know, what type of match is she going to have at WrestleMania? So I don't think you're going to be able to have that slow build like you did with Bill Goldberg.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And, you know, MMA, I don't know. Look, I would say, I guess cold shoulder maybe is the right thing to say. That's what we gave CM Punk coming over, you know? And I have a feeling that it's fans just, you know, you have to pay your dues. Regardless of how great the great accomplishments you have in other sports, I still believe the fans are going to make you want to pay your dues, you know, and I think that's going to happen with Ronda. But the funny thing is, had she maybe dealt with those losses in MMA a little bit different, maybe the crossover fans could have assisted her in coming over, but she kind of went out pouty and a poor loser, and it was only a couple years ago. One fight was about 16 months ago or 15 months ago, and the other one was about 2 years, and fans aren't going to forget that. You know, it's not like it was 10 years ago or anything. So yeah, I'm expecting that it could unravel too, man.
Let me ask you this: how many fights did Brock Lesnar have before he was given a championship title match?
He fought Heath Herring, and was that it, guys?
Frank Mir, and then
Randy Couture,
and then the fight before that, though, the
one in K1. Yeah, that one didn't matter too much. So he had it looked like he had 3 official fights, but 2 in the UFC, and next thing you know, he was fighting Randy Couture.
Which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure in your world you got to pay a hell of a lot more dues than just like, you know, 2 or 3 fights before getting a chance at the title, and you know, so even in the world of MMA where it's, you know, completely competitive, you know, there wasn't much of a build for Brock. He pretty much got a title. I would think he got that title opportunity based on his reputation and his name.
Mm-hmm. Dave, I want to ask you another question, and I brought up the name Ken Shamrock, and by the end of Ken Shamrock's pro wrestling career, he was doing a lot of moves. I mean, he was very fluid out there. The last event that I attended, I noticed that all the females were doing all the moves the men do. They were quick. They were agile. What kind of skill set are you anticipating a Ronda Rousey having early on, and then what do you think that will evolve into?
And I'm glad you used the word evolve, because women's wrestling has evolved so much over the last few years. You know, probably since you've watched wrestling, if you watched it now and watched the women's wrestlers, they're as good, sometimes even better than the men. They're in main event matches now on Raw. They're in main event matches on pay-per-view. So she's not going to be able to start slow. You know, this is, you know, but at the same time, there's probably a lot of women right now, guys, that are going to have to carry Ronda Rousey. A Charlotte Flair is somebody that, or an Asuka, would probably have to carry her. So maybe because the women are so skilled right now, it would probably help Ronda Rousey.
I see her, and this is really limited pro wrestling knowledge, but I see her kind of like a Hulk Hogan, kind of have like 12 basic moves, I guess, you know, and have them be power moves. Maybe a choke slam, you know. Obviously, her
clothesline from hell.
Yeah,
like
the
that.
assortment of throws, but I don't see her as an aerial acrobat, you know. Now, again, that said, I have much respect for what she's accomplished, and she's obviously has an athletic body, so I may be proven wrong, but I think early on, start with the power moves.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, right now there has been some crossover, like with some MMA, you know, with women's wrestling right now. So, you know, are the fans going to want to see those power moves? Or are they going to want to see more, you know, submission holds from Ronda Rousey? Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But probably you're right. She's probably going to have to do more power moves, especially with her limited knowledge right now.
I can't wait to see it. It all goes down. We got Elimination Chamber coming up on this weekend, and then the big card, WrestleMania, is right around the corner itself. And, folks, if you want to hear more pro wrestling talk, check out Dave LaGreca, Monday through Fridays, 9 Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. Dave, thank you so much for spending some time with us here. Man, we'd love to pick your brain close to the future as well, just to see, you know, recap everything she did and preview WrestleMania as well.
No, I really appreciate it, man, because you guys are fantastic. I love your show, and one day I'm gonna have to have you on to find out why there's so much hate when it comes to MMA fans and pro wrestling. Maybe it's a little jealousy. Maybe all the big names are moving to pro wrestling, so there's a little jealousy there. I don't know. You guys would be able to answer that better than me.
Thank you, sir. We'd love to be on. Just let us know. Take care.
Right.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you, man.
All right.
All right, you got
folks.
it. Thanks.
That's Dave LaGreca. Give him a follow on Twitter at David LaGreca1. And we're going to take last break of the first hour. It's MMA Junkie Radio on Sirius XM, Rush 93. Stay close, and we'll be right back.
baby. That's right. Big pimpin'.
Hey, idiot. Yeah, you. Can you please tap that rather large fellow on the shoulder and tell him it's time for more MMA Junkie Radio with Gorgeous George and Goes? Thank you.
Get the radio channel numbers for NBA, NHL, and college basketball games sent directly to your smart device. Go to SiriusXM.com/sportsnow. Then click Add to Calendar. You'll even get the links to listen directly on the SiriusXM app. All right, that was Dave LaGreca from Busted Open. Thank you so much, Dave, for your time, and shout out to Danny Otto and the Goes for lining that one up. So as you can tell, we are up against the top of the hour. We had a extended interview there with David, and now we're going to pay a few more bills. But when we come back, we'll be talking to Bryan Caraway, UFC bantamweight. He's fighting at UFC 222 a week from tomorrow, and fights are taking place in Las Vegas. Your headliner that weekend is Unit Skava versus Cyborg. Female featherweight division. Cyborg will be defending against the young lady from Russia. We'll be right back after this break. We'll talk to Bryan Caraway. We'll take some calls, and Matt Erickson will also join us, our associate editor, at MMA Junkie, as we finish our previews and our final predictions for UFC on Fox 28, which takes place tomorrow night. So stay close, and we'll be right back. It's MMA Junkie Radio on SiriusXM, Rush 93.
Nine problems, but a bitch ain't one. I got the rap patrol on the patrol. Foes that want to make sure my casket's closed. Rap critics say he's money cash. I'm from the hood, stupid. What type of facts are those? If you grew up with hoes in your zap of toes, you celebrate the minute you was having dope. I'm like critics, you can kiss my whole ass. If you don't like my lyrics, you can press fast forward. Got beef with radio if I don't play they show. They don't play my hits. Well, I don't give a so. Rap mags try and use my black and so advertisers could give them more cash for ads. I don't know what you take me as or understand the intelligence that Jay-Z has. I'm from rags, the richest, I ain't dumb. I got 99 problems, but a bitch ain't one. Hit me.
Here we go. It's the MMA Junkie Radio Show.
99
second hour.
Chain one.
Again, thank you to Dave LaGreca for his time. Catch him and Bully Ray and Mark Henry throughout the week, Monday through Friday on Rush 93 as they host Busted Open, the award-winning Busted Open on our channel. 9 a.m. Eastern Start Time with a replay at 12 p.m. Eastern Start Time. UFC 224 keeps getting fatter. Morocco, the magnificent Morocco from MMA Junkie, put out a story along with Simon Samano. Looks like they're targeting Amanda Nunes versus Raquel Pennington for the women's bantamweight title in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. That fight card would be taking place May 12th. Yeah, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It's a pay-per-view. And also on the card, Ronaldo Souza versus Kelvin Gastelum. That broke yesterday. Who's not digging that one, right?
Yeah.
I think that's clear #1 contender.
Should be.
Which probably isn't good news for Chris Weidman. He was one of the guys that was feeling like, hey, man, maybe I should be, sandwiched in there somewhere. And I would have a hard time disagreeing with him because of the recent win over Gastelum. This fight booking also is contrary to what Ali Abdelaziz was predicting on our show. Or I wasn't sure if it was one of his 7 predictions, but he did note that he thought Kelvin Gastelum was more than likely headed to welterweight. And I told him, hey, it seems like a hot ticket right now at middle. Might as well ride it out until that ride ends. And beating Souza will probably get you a title shot. So it looks like that's what they eventually went with. Vitor Belfort will battle Lyoto Machida. And that, I believe, has to be Vitor Belfort's last fight. Nick Hine versus Davi Ramos. Ramazan Amiv versus Alberto Mino. Junior Albini versus Alexei Olenek. Cesar Ferreira versus Carl Robertson. Hey, is Junior Albini the guy that wore the diaper?
Yeah, the baby Albini.
Babies. Yeah, he took a lot of heat for that one. When Goes gets back, I want to run a little experiment by you guys. Going back to what you and Marco discussed on an earlier call about oversaturation and what can they do? Is it more shows or too many fighters or too much MMA? I don't know. It obviously all doesn't equally get us excited. But the funny thing is, when you watch a boxing matchup, Floyd versus Conor, for example, the co-main event are usually boxers you've heard of and could be in line for a title or maybe to be something within a year or 18 months or maybe even sooner. I don't know. I don't even remember the co-main event that night. But everyone below that, Danny, Junkie Nation, just seems to be a fighter that's so far away from anything, any limelight at all, that you don't give a shit. That's why boxing, only really purists are sitting in their seats because nothing else seems to matter. Right. MMA's a little bit the same. Now remember, boxing's like 4 boxing matches, including the main event. MMA's like 12, 13 deep. So again, a lot could say, well, yeah, it's the same thing I see in MMA. The first match, hardly anyone's there. That's true. But the main card is 5 alone, and it's as pretty filled out as it's going to get. I mean, even the biggest celebs that want to make their grand entrance start to show up about that time. But so this is what I wanted to do was I went back 1 year to a card called UFC Fight Night 103. It was Rodriguez versus Penn.
Oh, you had to depress me.
And it's not an exact year, but it was January of 2017.
Right.
I'm going to read you what was on Fight Pass.
Okay.
And this may, we'll do a couple of these, and then it'll maybe answer our question, should we be giving a shit, as fans, as media, as much about some of these fights as we sometimes think we should, because the next great fighter could be on there. Nina Ansaroff fought Jocelyn Jones-Lybarger. Walt Harris fought Chase Sherman. Joaquim Christensen fought Bojan Mihovic. And Cyril Asker fought Dmitry Smolyakov. Yeah. Now, there were 4 finishes, so if you're going there to see people get fucked up, to see fights, you got that.
Right.
Are any of those names really in any position to do anything great? I think Nina's kind of starting to get matched up against.
She's waving at people.
A little bit, right. Like, yeah, she's in that 115, maybe 10 to 15 range where she may be able to strike. What helps is she's dating the current bantamweight champion, so they're a little bit of a power couple, and so I think she may get more popularity out of that. Not to diminish her skills, because she's handling her business, she's winning. But of all those names, I think that's the only one that's really, I think, of note, right? Hell, I couldn't even tell you if some of these are in the UFC.
I mean, yeah. I was just gonna say some of them aren't even around still.
I'm a pretty strict roster minder, and sad part is I knew those names. As you're saying it off.
Still in the UFC?
Most of them are, but they're on that reserve list for when we need to fill content to serve our masters and fill content on a show. We're gonna put those guys in a regional show, kind of a category.
Here's another one. UFC on Fox 23. It was January 28th, 2017. Fight Pass was Alexander Pantoja versus Eric Shelton. Jason Gonzalez versus JC Cottrell. Pantoja's making noise.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're okay there. I'm going to borrow 2 from the prelims because there was only 2 on Fight Pass. Eric Spicely and Alessio Di Tricrio and Marcos Rogerio de Lima and Jeremy Kimball. I don't know that anybody's still...
Again, in almost a whole year, nobody's really cracking
Pantoja's not cracking but he's making noise, yeah. The next card was February 4th. It was Bermudez and the Zombie, the Korean Zombie, UFC 104.
Wow, it feels like it was just not that long ago.
Khalil Roundtree versus Daniel Jolly. Nico Price versus Alex Morano. Morano just got a win. That was a no contest, by the way. And I'm going to borrow 2 fights from prelims because it was only 2 on Fight Pass. One's Tisha Torres and Beck Rawlings. And one's Michinori Tanaka versus Ricardo Ramos.
Well, the easy one is Torres is in the co-main event.
Torres in the co-main event 1 year later.
I think a lot of people know who Khalil Roundtree is now.
And Morano just got a win, so I'd have to see what else he's done since then. What is Morano's
I think while you're looking that up, I think you make the argument, and I'm not sure where you're leading to this, so I definitely don't want to step on your point here. But a lot of these cards come from within the same era that we're talking about, from even a year ago. Hell, we could even go back 2 years ago. And just recently with my Mayweather-McGregor article, I had to do some metric studying for kind of my argument that I was making in the article, why we need more storylines over super fights and why we need contenders over carnivals. In the spirit of the argument that me and Marco were having, as far as trying to trim, because again we were on the same side of it, which was the whole point there. Hopefully people caught was that finding middle ground, and in the metrics it essentially divvies down to the shows, and the oversaturation starts at about 2014, and about 2014 to 2016 you see a big step up where we're at our maximum. We're at our maximum supplies as the UFC, and not only we're at maximum supplies, we're using those maximum supplies because the overhead narrative makes a little more sense. Once the sale happens in 2016, we were ramping up for the sale, but not all good things can last forever, and like the saying, which is why I found it so silly for not picking on Marco, but anybody, for the oversaturation argument. There really is no argument. It's more about finding a middle ground, because you can't argue that too much of a good thing is a bad thing. I don't know exactly how that saying goes, but that saying is applicable throughout all of life for a reason. It's true. It's just, what is that point of diminishing returns? So when you look at the metrics, 2014 to 2016, we have an uppage of shows, right? But pay-per-view numbers start dropping about 2016 to 2018, where we have now. So it's the last 2 years to where...
Wait. You can't include 2016 because that was their biggest year ever.
It was.
We had 5 that went over $1 million.
Yeah, but that's the overlap year. So I'm saying 2014 to 2016, 2016 to 2018. 2016 is the overlap year because right in the middle of that year, that's when the sale happens. That's when all these shifts in the regime happen. That's when all the changes start coming to the forefront.
Okay.
Now we're feeling all those changes from that midpoint of 2016 to now 2018, where we're having this conversation. We've kind of felt all those changes. Some have kind of come around. Some were slow. Some were like, nah, oversaturation nonsense. Maybe a year ago. Now they're like, yeah, we got to figure something out. I can see where this thing's trending. You know what I'm saying? So I guess that's my point there. I don't think any of us can argue that. It's more the point of arguing, which is not really an argument. It's a good argument to have. Is what's the point of diminishing returns? You know what I'm saying? And like from these Fight Pass ones, like, I agree. Like there are some names where it's like, okay, we can say, okay, some are worth it. Some have more potential than others, or this or that. But at the end of the day,
I guess my point was, is it paying dividends for them to go 12, 13 deep? Like, one argument would be, hey, let's have the same amount of shows, but do we really need to have 12 or 13 fights?
Right.
We went through 3 cards, and there was maybe Tisha Torres, Khalil, and Pantoja maybe that stood out, and there was about another 25 fighters that could have just been discarded, possibly, you know? Ryan LaFleur and Juan Carnero fought here. Philippe Nover, Nick Lentz. Nick Lentz, I think, got that win that Will Brooks was big for him.
Right.
But other than that,
how much of this is them catering though to people, them wanting people to catch Fight Pass, and them just trying to entertain a live crowd. Because if you have tickets to the event, fuck, if they told you there were 16 fights, you'd probably show up for all 16, right? I mean,
I think they're doing both.
Me? Fuck no. 16?
yeah, I would.
16?
We sat through like 28 matches at King of the Cage.
Yeah, but we couldn't wait to give out our DVD or our CDs or whatever.
Here's my answer to the question. I know I was just long-winded with that setup, but what that setup was about to set up was the metric. That metric is where the argument to me ends. Why the hell is our pay-per-view sales going down, guys? Why the hell is our pay-per-view sales trending downwards? You know what I'm saying? Just go. You can go Google that up right now, by the way. Go Google UFC pay-per-view sales. You can actually, Tapology has its own section. There's actually multiple metrics. You can go type in. It'll be on your first page right now. Why are those metrics going down?
They don't have stars. They don't have their big stars.
You know what I'm saying? And that sparks the, what we were talking about, Dave LaGreca, building storylines and why it's so important to build your stars and why it's so important to build the product around the stars. So you have that baseball that you can afford to, like Marco said, you can afford to have shows and you're still going to have a base audience, right? But our base audience, we always have a base audience for MMA, but that base audience, according to the numbers, are going down. So you might not like my opinion, but these are facts, and that's what it comes down to.
Does the UFC need all those fighters? Like, if we trimmed off,
but no.
If we trimmed off the last 3 fights, we'd still have about 9. Could the other fighters get paid better?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think by those metrics, George, where you're going, you're absolutely right. And then I think if we even take it from a further, more of a non-so-short-sighted metric as far as not only will they get paid better, but we'll be making an example of that fighter, where that fighter goes, that fighter becomes the Chuck Liddell that inspires the John Jones, and that John Jones, because I think that's kind of falling off, right? Where it's like, now it's like, well, who's our next generation inspiring people? McGregor's great. He's breaking records, but he's also inspiring people. And again, nothing wrong with fighters looking out for their brand and their business, right? But we're also seeing an age where fighters, like Goz has been saying for years in the show, be careful what you wish for. You want certain things, be careful what you wish for. And that's kind of the generation. So we kind of got to ask ourselves, and we don't want to sound like old fuddy-duddies at morals and meritocracy and all this stuff. But at the same time, yeah, but there has to be Matlock and tomato soup. But there has to be some type of balance, right, guys? And I think that's whether it's us, our callers. I think that we can all agree on that. There's got to be some kind of balance.
Prune juice and blankets.
Hey, most of their shows, another thing. I'll read off some quick attendances: 10,000, 12,000, 10,000, 16,000, 10,000, 13,000, 8,800, 7,600, 17,000, 15,000, 10,000. So people are showing up. Some of these arenas may only fit 10,000. I don't know. It looks like some of them are still home runs for them, and maybe that's what the UFC's end game is. Hey, while you may not give a shit about some of these fighters, we are in foreign territories and we're putting a product in front of them and just creating. They may have just an overall plan that benefits them that for us we just have to put up with because that's what we chose to do. Is our jobs is to cover them. But like I say, could they trim down the roster and build up the 400 fighters rather than spread their resources over 600 fighters? Maybe pay them better, promote them better. Have better cards. Like, did we need to have Belém? I guess right. Lyoto. Oh, it's Lyoto's hometown, but I don't know anyone else from Belém. Could we have skipped that one? And could we have used Lyoto and Anders on the Perth, Australia card 1 week later? The card that was kind of, hey, should we get that pay-per-view or not? That's what I wonder. And I'm not saying let's go down from 45 to 25. I'm saying how about from 45 to 40? That's 5 cards. That's 125 matchup. Do I got that right? No, it's 60 matchups, 125 fighters that could be sprinkled onto other cards, especially the pay-per-views, especially Big Fox. I want pay-per-views to pop. I want Big Fox cards to pop because that's the chance to grab these audiences.
Yeah, or you may have to get rid of those fighters. And if you do, then I think you have to look at, because we talked about competition earlier, right?
Are we giving away a potential?
My competition by giving out those fighters.
Could be.
And some of those names we were reading, yeah, I mean, Belter could use a Nick Lentz, right? But some of the other ones, I don't see them doing much for them.
That's an interesting point, and I guess that would even spark an even deeper conversation of should they buy Bellator, should they start their own Strikeforce challengers? But I do, as far as like a home base strategy, like what George says, where I agree, it sounds simple, but it's true. I think they need to bump up these Fox shows and these pay-per-views, these flagships, because when you bump those up, it means you're bumping storylines, it means you're bumping up contenders, it means you're bumping up titles and all the other things they like and the other things the sport needs. So I think that's great. But I also like that you mentioned Brazil. I was kind of off topic, but on topic, was talking with somebody who actually had experience covering up forgive me, guys. Flamenco, the Brazilian soccer team, the Jose Aldo
Flamengo with a G.
From forgive me, someone's gonna beat me up for saying. But she was explaining to me. She was Brazilian, and she was explaining to me just the how big that sport is. And even though MMA is it grew in popularity, especially recently, it still is only so small in Brazil compared to the soccer market. And she was explaining to me, even admitting as a Brazilian, saying, yeah, we're very fickle as fans. The market's it's much more volatile for MMA because with us as sports fans and how we are culturally, we're very much and you guys have said it on here on this show, and listeners have heard it from other places that Brazil loves their champions, right? But when they're not doing so well, they're not as enthusiastic. And again, we're talking about metrics and hard numbers; those reflect that too. So it almost makes you question, like, you're right. Do we really need to go into the smaller Brazilian markets? We love the Sao Paulo and the Rio shows, but do we need to go in the smaller markets? And talking about the development deals that you guys just mentioned, is this growing pains that we have to sit through? I think we went through those. We've had our what do you call the Abu Dhabi with the 3D management, whatever those guys were buying into the company, and changes really didn't come. Flash Entertainment, and then we've had the Mexican development deals where we went real big, right, with the tough Latin Americas, and these deals that you heard about, they weren't really publicized, but these developmental deals that the UFCs were doing with a lot of these fighters, getting them camps, sponsorships, helping these guys travel.
It all goes away with a loss.
And it all goes away with a loss.
Has Rodriguez even fought since that fight?
Well, I'm not sure, but I think I want to say John Morgan. Maybe you guys could say. I don't know if it was John Morgan talking about this on his podcast, but these programs and stuff have been they turn the faucet off, as far as a lot of those programs. So it's like, what are we waiting for? What are we really developing at this point? It just seems really, really disjointed, the global plan. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
So let me ask you this. I don't follow pro wrestling that close, but what's NXT? Is NXT's owned by WWE, right?
Yeah, I think
that's lighter weight classes
series, right?
I think so. Yeah, that's
what. So it's not lighter weight classes. It's just.
I think they're just developing fighters.
Why doesn't the UFC do like an NXT?
The UFC?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what kind of like LFA serves that purpose in a way, right? Unofficially.
I suppose, but why don't they use what if the UFC used their NXT to go to these smaller cities, I guess, and it's basically another promotion. You can call it whatever. You don't have to call it like NXT UFC or UFC Light or anything. You don't have to call it anything. We can just know that the UFC owns it, but they have their own world champions, and when those guys are ready to take the next level, they move on to the UFC product. Or couldn't they do something like that? It seems like WWE's being able to pull it off.
In theory, there's been a lot of iterations of that, right? SmackDown, WWE, Strikeforce Challengers, NXT. There's a lot of, like, from whatever we're talking about, there's examples, and I'm on board with that. But I guess the bigger picture and what that kind of conversation leads into is a home for these things, because really there's just too much for the UFC, there's too much for this, there's too much for fight. Exactly. So that's what kind of bums me out, because it feels like I shout out to Eric Winter. That guy, I love how active that guy is on social media. But when it felt like when he was behind the helm of Fight Pass, like, they were he was fighting to get big matches on Fight Pass, bringing this, and then that's when they started doing, reaching out to, Titan. They started acquiring, Invicta, and acquiring other things. So the UFC's content was getting better. They were drawing big names and established names to get the hardcores into this new venture of digital platform, and then they were taking all the regionals. And is that a surefire way? I don't know. We still haven't really got to see the results of that. But in theory, you buy up these things, and you have your guys. You're able to house them under your brand. And playing to what Go said earlier, which is a really good point that I forgot to think about, was, yeah, you get to keep them out of your competition's hands too. Without having to, empty out the pocketbook and take another big gamble across the table like you did with Strikeforce back in the day, and try to do something like that with Bellator, because it looks like they might have to do something that drastic if they really are worried about the market.
They had, like, when Challengers was around, people still watched it. Looking back, Challengers was actually really, really, a big commodity for them.
Yeah.
Produced Daniel Cormier.
We just didn't know it. You know what I mean? And Tyron Woodley.
OSP Musasi, I think, headlined one of their shows.
Fought on Challengers, but we didn't know it at the time. We just thought, is it a Challengers? I'm skipping it, because you're already like, is it UFC? No, it's Strikeforce. Okay, is it Strikeforce? One of their big cards.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what they call them. No, it's Challenge. But looking back, now we have that. Now we have that information.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Dana White Contender Series, because if a fighter's proud to be an LFA champion or a Titan champion, why wouldn't they be proud to be a champion at Dana White's Contender Series, or just call it Contender Series? You know what I mean? And knowing that if you're that champion, part of your contract's to be that champion and to defend once, and should you do it, you're automatically in the title hunt. It doesn't make you a semifinalist or a number one contender, but we'll just call it you're in the title hunt in that appropriate division in the UFC.
You know what I want to see? Any nerds out there who have the time, go back and find out what the average is, the payout for all the Fight Pass fighters, right? It's usually 3, 2. Find out what that number is on average, and then we need to figure out if that would kill the UFC. You know, is it a really high number, or is it a low number? What is that? Because maybe we just got it all wrong, and they could care less about the amount of money that they're giving those guys on that Fight Pass, and it's totally worth it to them. Who knows?
I don't know, man. We gotta take a break.
Somebody just got back to you.
Okay.
So we need to.
All right. Let's take a break. You're listening to MMA Junkie Radio on Sirius XM Rush 93. Stay close, and we'll be right back.
They pat down TSA agents because they don't know where those people have been, and because they can. They are Gorgeous George and Goes, and this is MMA Junkie Radio.
All right, we're back. We're able to catch up with one of our guests. Bryan Caraway has called into the show. He'll be fighting Cody Stamann a week from Saturday, a week from tomorrow, at UFC 222. He joins us now on MMA Junkie Radio. What's up, Bryan? How you doing?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, thanks for joining us here on the show. You're on with George and Goes and our fight analyst, Dan Tom. We're definitely looking forward to your fight versus Cody Stamann. You know, you've been ranked for quite a long time in that division. You don't fight as frequently as some of the other fighters, but you're still there, and because of that, you're always within arm's reach of a possible title shot. First of all, how's your health going into this fight? Is this the year where you can maybe peel off 3 fights in 1 year?
Absolutely, man. That's the plan. I'm going to try to get 4 fights this year. You know, I've been being plagued kind of by some injuries and some other stuff, and finally got everything situated. Having the new UFC PI has been awesome. Having a physical therapist on hand to work with me with my schedule has been it's been incredible. It's been imperative to my health and success of getting back into the octagon. So I'm really pumped, man. My body's feeling good, and I can't wait to get back in there, man. I want to fight, like I said, 3-4 times this year and really push for that title run at the end of the year.
Bryan, you're fighting Cody Stamann, a guy that's debuted in the UFC last year. He's got a great record, though, so definitely jumps out at us. And he's gone out there and performed. Usually ranked fighters don't give unranked fighters an opportunity. You did. Did that have something to do with, I guess, the fact that you've had layoffs? You lose a little bit of maybe your clout as a ranked fighter?
No, I think Cody Stamann's fucking super tough, dude. He's one of the top guys, even though he doesn't have a lot of experience in the UFC, he does have a good record, and he's undefeated in the UFC. You know what I mean? So he showed up. And most people, the first fight get jitters up, and he performed well. And, he came off a really good win against Tom Disqueznoy, his last fight, so he's had a lot of hype behind him. So, I think this is definitely a good challenge. He might not be ranked, but, I'm not taking him lightly. I have to definitely get past him. I'm not even thinking, obviously everybody's trying to be a champion in the long run and fight for the world title and win it. But, he's in my way right now, and I've been out for a while, and I think he's a great opponent to come back to. He's tough, he's game, and you got to bring it out of him.
Bryan Caraway, our guest here on MMA Junkie Radio. He's fighting on in a week from Saturday, UFC 222 versus Cody Stamann, like we mentioned. The fight can be caught on the Fight Pass, and the Fight Pass portion of the card starts at 6:30 p.m. Eastern start time, 3:30 Pacific. There's 2 other fights on Fight Pass, including another local Vegas guy, good friend of the show, Mike Pyle. All right, what do you have for Bryan Caraway?
Bryan, I want to take you back to earlier in your career, some things that you've shared with us, like living in the RV, training with no heat, and how cold sometimes it was. How often do you go back to those times and think about that, and can that help fuel you at times?
Really, man. You don't forget where you came from, and realizing that I fought in way worse times, way worse conditions, under, just way more adversity. And, I'm in the UFC, I'm blessed. You know what I mean? I'm blessed to be in the UFC, I'm blessed to be here. And I'm not going to take that for granted, and I'm not going to take it lightly. I'm going to look at the top organization in the world, fighting the best athletes in the world. And, I'm stoked, I'm pumped, and I've been training really hard. For people out there that don't know, Obviously, I've been injured, which has been a hard road for an athlete anyway to be out for a year and a half. And I also lost a really close dear friend of mine. He was not only just my coach, Robert Falls, but somebody who's a mentor to me, and he's like a father figure to me. I've known him since I was 18, 19 years old in Team Quest. I grew up in Washington State on the border. Oregon, Team Quest is out of Oregon. He ran that team for a long time. And, he's somebody I kind of always looked up to. And 4.5, 5 years ago, I moved to Vegas to kind of, take my career to another level and finally, get mentored by somebody who I respect, who has a tremendous amount of knowledge. And, unfortunately, we lost him this December. And it's been really, really hard. So I'm just pumped to get back in there because I know he'd want me to get in there and he'd want me to fight. He wants me to fight 3-4 times a year. He wants me to win the title. He wants me. He believes in me. He believes that I can be the world champ. And he's with some of the top best guys in the entire world for 20 years. So I really believe him when he said that I could win the world title. And so part of this fight I'm dedicated to him. It's also the day before my mom's birthday. So I got a lot of great incentives to look at that. Even though he's not with me, he'll always be there with me in spirit and in my heart, and I always remember the things he taught me. And I got more feel for that than ever to win.
Bryan, there's been so much evolution in our sport and the training methods. You have the UFC PI here in Las Vegas, and I know all that stuff helps fighters, but at any time, does a fighter ever have to just kind of go back to their roots and almost Apollo Creed style, just get grimy again?
Absolutely. I kind of almost had to do that in a certain sense. Obviously the PI is nice, and I've always done with it, but I kind of came back to my senses. I brought some guys down I used to train with. Drew LaGreca, he was in the UFC for a little bit. He was one of my students. I brought some other old school wrestlers back in, and I basically kind of ran my camp myself this camp. And that's how I did it for a long time. You know, I was a head coach for a team. I head coach Misha. Head coach a lot of other fighters. And Coach Wallace and I had a team coming. Kind of, I'm still at Extreme Couture, Eric McStill, with Dennis Davis. Those guys are my family. I love them. But those guys are like peers to me. You know, like they're my buddies. And Coach Wallace is gone, so I kind of took the reins over of Coach Wallace head coaching group that we had at the PI, and I'm keeping this tradition alive. And I'm working with these guys and kind of bringing the old school, you know, where I'm back and you know, kind of forcing myself to re-go over techniques to help these other people out, re-go over techniques, retrain, refocus my mind, sharpen my mind on all the little intricacies of, you know, of MMA. So I think that's really helped me to kind of go back and just, you know, really rely on myself. You know, I realized that Chris Paul did not hear how much I relied on him. And I think through adversity is when people grow the most. And not having him here has been hard emotionally, but it's brought a lot out of me from that, because I didn't have him bring a scapegoat or for him telling me I had to rely on myself. So it really made me pick up my game.
Dan Tom, our fight analyst, has a question for you. Go ahead, Dan. What do you have for Bryan Caraway?
Hey, Bryan. It's good to talk to you, man. I haven't seen you at the gym in a minute because I haven't been at the gym, but it's good to hear that not only, you know, you're back in the gym working toward a fight, but just kind of what you just said as far as taking that next step and teaching. I'll be honest, when a fighter says that I'm running my own camp, that's generally kind of a flag. But knowing you, and we've shared said coach Robert Follis, and I'm grateful to have been lucky enough to be able to share that coach with him with you. But I've also seen you do some teaching on the mat. Hell, if I'm being honest, you've taught me some things, and I don't think people would realize you're actually a really good teacher, Bryan. Do you feel that even though as sad as the adversity recently has been to deal with, do you think that it's kind of forcing you to take that next step, a step that arguably anybody that knows you've been ready for, but is this kind of forcing you to take that next step in a positive way?
You know, I think so a little bit, and you know, let me retract that. I'm not fully running my camp myself, you know, because I know I can be a red flag. It's just in the UFC there's too much to do, but the things that I do need to put off and have somebody help me. Like I said, I have Coach, you know, Eric McStill, I have Coach Dennis Davis. Those guys are going to be in my corner. They are picking up those pieces that I can't do myself. But as far as things running my own camp, it was more of a, you know, I'm relying on myself so much instead of just kind of relying so much on Coach Paul and be mindless. You know, I'm putting a little bit more thought into things and stepping up and thinking about my career more, I guess, before I just kind of put it off on somebody else and just kind of do the work, which could be good. But I think, you know, not having it made me really reach inside me and refocus my energy instead of just like, oh, I can just do it. It made me have a fire because now I have to look to count on myself. It made me more dependent upon myself instead of just being so dependent on Coach Boss, which I feel like it could be a good thing, but it also could be kind of a bad thing that maybe lacking able to always figure it out. He could have the answer, he could fix something or whatever. So it's kind of been a good balance, you know. It's made me be more positive, pull more out of myself. But I also still have the people there, like Eric McStill, you know, like I said, Dennis Davis. I have my right hand man, Gustavo Lopez. He's going to be in the UFC soon. He's super tough. He's there helping me out with what I ever need for all my drilling sessions. So I have a really big group of people around me to bounce things off of, and you know, to help me out.
And let me say one last thing. Goes has one more question before Goes asks his question. I do want to say one thing. You know, again, I do my physical therapy at Extreme Couture. So I've had a chance to be there a little bit more often than I used to. And I've always said what happens in the gym stays in the gym. But I think there's some things that can be very safe to share. One thing is, yesterday the boys were banging with the not the 4-ounce skills, but they had the boxing. It was a great session, man. They really went at it, man. Everybody. But let me say something about Bryan. He always gets a lot of praise for being a great coach because he's a great grappling coach for a lot of fighters that have utilized him to get better, whether he's in the corner or he's just part of the camp. He's always gotten high praise for that. Of course, you can't deny that he's a great bantamweight. He's been ranked for many, many years. He's beaten a lot of top fighters. But one thing that I noticed yesterday, he's a great teammate because this is a guy that's winding down his camp, and so a lot of times when that's happening, you know, the fighter should be very selfish and just do them, you know, like they say, do me. And so one of the last sessions, I noticed that Bryan, before he went and hit the treadmill, he actually spots Kevin Lee, who's doing some training, and he's actually helping him with it, you know, just shouting some instructions and encouragement. And I thought that was pretty cool, you know, because again, Bryan fights next week on a pay-per-view, and a lot of times fighters are just like in, out, you know, focus, and that's great. I wouldn't tell anybody to deter that. You could just tell that Bryan thinks about others. He's got a big heart,
100%.
and he's actually taking the time. He's watching Kevin, and I don't know if he's got a role as part of Kevin's staff or what, or if it was just a friend, teammate in a situation, shouting instructions. I thought that was really, really cool. And then he went and did, you know, the road work that he was supposed to do for that day. So that was very cool to see Bryan as, you know, teammate, friend, helping others out.
Yeah, man, you know, karma comes around, and it's nice to have people that done there the same as you've done there, other guys on UFC, you kind of getting encouragement, knowing that, you know, yeah, we get in the sport, we get in the cage alone, but you can always carry a little bit of emotion in someone else with you. You know what I mean? What someone says, what someone does, that helps build your confidence and your emotions. Even though you're solely physically in there, you have other people mentally in your head helping you out or little things, and you know, everybody needs that. You know, everybody needs to know that even though you're in there alone, that you're not in there in spirit alone. You know, that the people who care about you, that those teammates that will show up, that will help you, that are willing to, you know, give a hand out if you need some help or something to drill. Because I know I appreciate that when I have somebody, you know, helping me that I respect or knowledgeable, or another guy. I have somebody who's a high-level guy in the UFC striking. He's telling me some striking techniques. It shows that he puts care into it, and I do. I care about my teammates. You know, we work hard together, we bleed together, we sweat together. I want to see them successful. I want to see them win. You know, I want to see them, you know, win the world titles. And because they say, you know, a rising tide raises all ships. And it's just not my nature not to if someone asks me, no matter what I'm in camp or technique, usually every day I'll stay and somebody asks me something about some wrestling technique, and I usually end up staying another 30, 40 minutes coaching some techniques or some problems that they had in training sessions. And, you know, it makes me better too. It makes me stop and think more cerebrally and, you know, break down what they're asking. And sometimes I caught myself missing steps of something like, damn, I know I'm having trouble with this. And then someone asks me, like, hey, I'm having trouble. And I know the answer, but I have to think about it. So when I start teaching it to them, I'll notice halfway between, oh, you have to do this step. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm not even doing that. I'm rushing myself. So it'll force me to stay sharp. So it's a win-win, I think, for everybody.
Bryan, I want to see if you feel like telling a story. You have time?
Sure.
Can you tell the story of our Nacho Libre friend? Do you remember what I'm talking about? That would wear a wrestling
Nacho
mask?
Libre. Oh, yes, Robin Phoenix.
Yeah.
Robin Phoenix. Good old Robin Phoenix. I love Robin Phoenix. That guy's a classic. So back in the day when MMA really wasn't sanctioned so much when I first started fighting, at least up in the northern states, Idaho, Montana, things like that, Washington, there was a time where they weren't really sanctioned, and they had all kinds of crazy fights, and it would always be the local tough cowboy or the local tough biker guy, or I didn't want to, you know, stereotype that. It could be a local tough anybody that always thought, oh, these MMA fighters, I could beat them up, I could get in there. And whenever this guy always seemed to come, you know, he's always seemed to be a big fan, but he'd never get in a fight and get drunk and talk crap. So they created, you know, this character was created, Robin Phoenix, and he'd come out with full rash guard on, tights, wrestling shoes, so you couldn't see anything, no markings, and he'd come out with a bright, hot pink, like metallic pink Lucha Libre Mexican wrestling mask on, and they'd tell the guy, they'd finally rile the guy so much, get him to commit, and you're going to fight, or he'd come up to the show, you know, and this happened to several guys, and they'd get catching it, hey, if you're around, fight this guy, and they'd have Robin Phoenix come out, and he'd start, like, calling him chicken. This is before the show even started. He'd make a whole spectacle, calling a chicken, knock his cup of water out of his hand, whatever, just taunting this guy, and here's this local tough guy who's always talking crap, you know, everybody knows how tough he's a bar, so they kind of coerced him into fighting, and he gets in the cage, and usually Robin Phoenix is somebody who's a very, very highly skilled professional fighter who's very talented. And basically he just comes in there and, you know, one of the stories, Robin Phoenix was running around, doing a chicken, running on the cage, you know, that takes the guy down. He's literally giving him Indian burns, the guy's trying to hit him, giving him biggies, patting him on the butt, spanking him, giving him wet waves in the air, and just smacking him, open hand smacking him, humiliating him to say, you know, hey, this is a real sport. You can't just walk in here and being tough is only a small factor of it. You know, these are trained athletes, and then eventually, you know, end up choking the guy or armbarring him or making him say uncle. And it was funny, you know, watching this happen at shows and shows again. these local tough guys who don't train and all that are talking about the sport like it's so easy, just get owned, you know what I mean? But then afterwards, you know, they would raise a hand or whatever. You know, most of the time the guys would be, the tough guys would be humbled, right? You know, they'd be calm. So every once in a while, there was one guy in particular I remember when Matthew Washington, he had to get beat up 3 times by Robin Phoenix, because the next time he's like, I'm going to get him this time, and then finally the third time he actually got beat up a little bit. Robin Phoenix actually beat him up a little, gave him a black eye, and hurt him a little bit, and humiliated him, and after that he was like, okay, I'm done. And that guy actually ended up started training MMA, and actually started training, joined the gym, and actually ended up being, I think it changed his whole life. He started training MMA, his personality changed, he started giving respect to the sport, which was kind of cool to see. But it was always fun to show up and see Robin Phoenix come there out of nowhere, so no one would know.
Great story. All right, man. Thanks for sharing that, Bryan. And thank you for the time on MMA Junkie Radio. We will be seeing you perform in about 1 week. So whatever's left of your camp, hope you have a safe camp and a safe weight cut.
Super stoked.
Time to get down.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I'm super pumped. Thank you, man. I'm going to get back there. I'm going to whoop that ass. I know Cody Stamen, you know, I don't like to talk shit a lot, but Cody Stamen's a good person. I have friends that are good friends with him. He came out and trained at Exchange Tour. I've heard nothing but good things about him. But Cody Stamen messaged you. I'm not overlooking you, but I'm going to come and fucking whoop your ass, man. I'm bringing it. I want this so bad more than anything in my life. I've been out. I have a lot of people behind me, and you better be ready to fight, bro, because I'm not backing up. I'm coming forward, and either we're going to win fight of the night, or you're going to get choked out and beat up quick, because I'm coming to play hard.
There you go. We'll end it with that. All right. Thanks, Bryan. Take care, buddy. Have a nice weekend.
See you later.
All right. See you. Bye. All right, folks. That's Bryan Caraway, and we're going to jump to our last commercial before we come back with Matt Erickson from MMA Junkie, who's out there covering UFC on Fox 28. By out there, I mean in Orlando, Florida. So we'll talk to him about that card. Stay close. We'll be right back.
drink Mentos-flavored Diet Coke without their stomachs giving a single fuck. They are Gorgeous George and Goes. And this is MMA Junkie Radio.
All right, we're back. And like we do every day, the MMA Junkie Radio crew, well, I shouldn't say every day. It's not like we've been doing it for 10 years, but we have the last few weeks. It's called the Daily Debate. And joining us for that, as he's about to find out, is our associate editor, Matt Erickson. You can follow him on Twitter at Matt Erickson. Matt, we got a question for you before we talk about that UFC on Fox 28 card. Goes, tell him the Daily Debate question.
So today's Daily Debate is, should Ronda Rousey's MMA accomplishments earn her the respect in the WWE locker room, or will she need to earn that respect through her performance?
What do you think, Matt?
What's WWE? How many people did I just piss off on this show by saying that? Of course she has to earn it, guys. Come on, man. Hey, you remember when Michael Jordan quit basketball for a while and went and played baseball? Do you think that those baseball players, even in the minor leagues, were like, oh, no, Jordan's the man. Jordan's the man. This is a different sport, and I don't care that we're talking about two combat sports here. They're different sports. She has to earn it.
All right, I'm meeting Matt halfway. I mean, an Olympian, a bronze medalist is walking through that door, and a world champion in the Pan American Games is walking through that door. A UFC world champion is walking through that door. So there better be some level of respect. Now, I get it. It's in their world, and she'll have to earn that respect, but they have to give her some respect for what she's accomplished. It's not like Kate Hudson just had a whim, and she shares the same manager as Charlotte, therefore she got in. No. Ronda Rousey is a legitimate athlete. And so, therefore, the locker room just better chill out just a little bit, in my opinion.
I think her leash will be a little bit longer than other people, right? A house is a house, and it has its rules, and you have to respect them. And at some point, she will have to respect them. But I do think her leash is maybe a little bit longer than anyone else.
I think she'll have a long leash. I think she'll have a good promotional push. I think she'll have a nice welcome. But respect, well, I don't think that's going to come as easily. There's two different crafts that's at hand, not just the pro wrestling craft, but the entertainment and acting craft of it. You know, she's still new to both of those things. So a third one that she does have a lot of clout in, I don't see it bleeding over too far. I still think she's going to have to earn a lot of respect behind the closed doors.
Yeah, she has work to do. Look, there's no way around it. She does have work to do, and there's going to be a bar, because she's getting paid. But at the same time, she's bringing eyeballs to the women's division, so they have to respect her for that. They have to respect her for her accomplishments. Those accomplishments didn't come from gimmies. She of course earned all that, and so therefore they have to understand that she'll be probably trying to do the same thing as a WWE performer. So it'll be interesting to see how this weekend start things off for Ronda Rousey. There you have it, folks. That's our Daily Debate, brought to you by the MMA Junkie Radio crew and Uncle Matt Erickson. Now let's talk about UFC on Fox 28 in Orlando. Josh Emmett versus Jeremy Stephens. Has anybody switched their mind? I've been going back and forth, man. Goes, what's your final prediction?
It doesn't take much to get me to switch. I think it all really comes down to the way Jeremy Stephens fights, but he's been evolving, right? He hasn't been that wild fighter that we've seen in the past. He's actually buckling down. He's a little bit more technical. That type of fighter, I think, has a good chance against Josh Emmett, but if he gets wild, I could see Josh Emmett countering, and I could see him finishing Jeremy Stephens. I ended up going with Emmett.
I'm finally going to go with Emmett. I think that's just my guy, and if it's too late to switch it on the staff picks, then so be it. I've been all over the place, back and forth, early predictions in the week, but I just think that this is the new guy, and I point to Stephens. He's been awesome as of late, but he has managed to lose 13 fights. He's come up a little bit short in those 13 fights. This could very easily be one of them. I don't know, but I think I'm going to switch back to Emmett. Matt, who looked the best, by the way, at the weigh-ins?
I think Josh Emmett looked the best at the weigh-ins. He was down pretty early. Stephens came down a little bit later. That doesn't always necessarily mean anything. It just could have meant that he didn't feel like coming down right on time. But I'll say this, he did come down prepared to get behind the towel right away, so I think he was probably working on getting those last few ounces off. So Emmett did look a little bit better. My pick for this was Emmett, but I was back and forth too. And the reason I was back and forth is, like we look at Jeremy Stephens like this guy who's been around forever, and when you have 25 UFC fights, you kind of start to think, oh, this guy's pushing 40, right? He's only 31. He's younger than Josh Emmett. So I think from a physical standpoint, from an age standpoint, he's
probably maybe hitting his prime right now, even though he's got some tread on the tires, and he feels like that too. So I mean, I think it's a great fight. He's favored, right? So, but my pick is Emmett.
Dan?
I'm on the other side. I'm on Stevens here. I feel like he's not gotten a lot of credit. I think the narrative's been kind of set in on him as a brawler kind of guy, and the record can be, maybe it's his time has passed, but I think he's one of those rare cases like a Robbie Lawler where he's got that kind of late renaissance where it kind of took him a little bit longer to get to the dance to find the perfect formula with Eric Del Fiero and Alliance MMA, and I just think he's more, at the end of the day, this could be Emmett's spot. He has wrestling, which has troubled Jeremy Stevens. He has counterpunching, like Go said, which has troubled Stevens. But I still haven't seen enough from Emmett. Most of his fights haven't gone to the third round. Only a few have in the UFC. He's lost half of those, and he's looked kind of tired to tire in victory and defeat in some of those too. So against a guy whose pace only grows, who only gets better, and who has plenty of experience, not just experience, but in 5-round fights, that ended up being the deciding factor for me to go with Stevens. But would I be surprised if Emmett goes out there and beats him? Not at all.
I was going to switch back right here in the middle of this spot to Stevens, and then Matt said he had to come out with the towel, so I go, no, now I feel good about Emmett. And now Dan has convinced me to go back to Stevens. So I'm right now I'm going with officially Jeremy Stevens. Hey, let's talk about the co-main event, though. Tisha Torres will be mixing it up with Jessica Andrade. Matt Erickson, who do you like here?
I picked Tisha Torres, and, our staff picks are live on the site right now. They have it for almost a couple hours. Only 2 of us picked Tisha Torres. I feel like, from a betting standpoint, this line seemed way off. I mean, I think Jessica's like a 3-1 favorite, maybe a little bit more. That really surprised me when I saw that when it finally came out. I like Tisha. Something about her. Sometimes you just go with a gut instinct, right? I mean, I like the fact that she finally got that finish a couple fights ago last summer. Yeah, she didn't finish Michelle Watterson, but she looked good in that fight. I feel like this is kind of her time right now.
You ever heard of the Aryan Brotherhood?
Yeah.
So somebody can be an Aryan, somebody can be a librarian. Matt Erickson's a contrarian. He's only going with Tisha Torres because he's a contrarian. I was wondering where this was going.
Me too. I was like, oh.
He's also an Aryan. No, I'm just kidding. If you put a gun to Matt Erickson's head right now and says, you don't get to play with Penny and Bailey ever again. Those are your dogs' names, right? I got it right?
Yeah.
You'll never get to play with them again unless this fight goes down. I bet you he switches to Andrade. He's just a contrarian.
No way.
He likes to, be cute and go against the grain. And fuck, he's up there. He's at the top right now. So I can't really say too much while I'm way down in the basement. Can you guys hear me down here? But I don't know, man. I think Andrade is a full package. I'm sticking with her. And by the way, I just switched back to Emmett.
All right. I'm also going to side with Andrade. Too much pressure.
Okay.
Andrade for me, but I completely understand Matt's love for Torres. She's usually an auto pick for me, so I don't blame Matt for taking that shot.
Matt, I love your dogs, man. I'm a big fan of yours on Instagram, just for when you come home and the dogs are at the door.
They hate it when I'm gone. Hey, and you know what else? Nothing says more than I'm a contrarian in these picks than if you look at the first fight on the main card. Mike Perry, the biggest favorite on the entire thing against Max Griffin, and I'm the only one picking Max Griffin.
I like that, though, by the way.
Matt, we promised to have a longer spot with you. Sorry that we treated you like Matt Damon. Caraway messed things up a little bit running late. But we have to cut out. But have a great time out there in Orlando. And we look forward to your coverage of the show. And thank you very much for joining us today.
You got it, guys. We'll talk soon.
All right. And, folks, we are out of here. We're not going to do any overtime today. I want to thank all of our guests. We'll thank all of our guests on Monday. We just got to get out of here. Have a nice weekend and be champs.